Joining us is former state senator and King 5 political analyst Reuven Carlyle to sort of break it down for us. First of all, let's walk us through your thoughts generally on this lawsuit.
Yeah, well, the lawsuit was inevitable, and really it's a game of chess, and there's a number of plays in that game that have been mapped out from the very beginning, and the majority Democrats that passed it anticipated this, they planned on it, and so the lawsuit was inevitable, and now it just takes that next step in the process.
And so there's work underway to potentially bring this to voters and let them have a say in this. Would that be double trouble for this?
You know, it's very interesting because it's not a question of whether it'll be on the ballot. It probably will, but it's a lot more difficult to get the entire thing on the ballot the way it's been designed. They passed it in such a way that makes a referendum very difficult.
So a yes or no is not what's going to be possible here.
Exactly. It's not going to be a simple, direct yes or no, most likely. It'll probably be a bit more complex, that convoluted question of yes means no and no means yes.
The voters hate that.
They hate that, but that's probably, there's a good chance that's what's coming.
So do you think then, did lawmakers sort of overplay their hand by blocking a referendum? You
know, I think it's fair to say that even the most partisan Democrat has to admit that it was definitely, they followed the letter of the law, but they really made it difficult for the public to have a direct, simple up or down vote. And there is a pathway toward this to be before the voters, and that would be to put it on the ballot as a constitutional amendment. That would have been the cleaner way to do it, the more direct way to do it, as opposed to having the state Supreme Court rule that it's not constitutional, or that it is constitutional, and then have a vote. So they really made it a pretty complex approach.
If all that happened, it'd be kicking the can down the road, so who knows when it might actually take effect, right? Let's just talk about all the money that's at stake. That's a lot of revenue that would be at stake to fund lots of programs. What happens if it does not go through?
Yeah, they are anticipating between $3 and $4 billion, so a very substantial. The overall budget's about $40 billion a year, so a really big increase. At the same time, while much of the money goes into education and other services, it's all at play because it doesn't take effect for 2 years and it takes a year to collect. So ultimately, how does the budget situation look in 3 years with the federal administration cuts, with the normal budget crisis? So it's tough to say what would actually be cut or added by the time it takes effect. But ultimately, they did bake it into their budget assumptions, and that means that they've spent the money.
Okay, so which programs or spending cuts do you see would be on the table most at risk if that money does not come in?
The majority of the money goes to the general fund. It's not dedicated for specific sources. So the general fund includes education and healthcare and housing, and additionally the Working Families Tax Credit, it funds that. So a lot of those programs would have to be reevaluated if that source of revenue doesn't come in a couple of years.
So how do you think the governor is going to respond to lawmakers?
Yeah, I mean, so far the governor has been all in. He's been supportive of majority Democrats. He's been supportive of the policy. He signed the bill, and he anticipates, I think, like everyone, that it'll probably end up before the voters.
Any final thoughts on this? What do you expect will happen?
I think the combination of the lawsuit and the combination of the potential of it going before the voters, look, I think the majority Democrats have done what they wanted to do for a long time, which is to create the infrastructure of an income tax. The $1 million threshold is really the issue. They did oppose amendments that would have made that in statute and in law, and so that doesn't exist. So if the public thinks it's going after them next and that threshold of $1 million is going to be lowered, then I think it's in trouble with the voters.
Okay. Reuven, thank you so much. We love your insight into all of this.
Thank you.